Nike's annual report just came out. This is July 2026, reporting for the previous fiscal year. And they generated $46 billion in revenue, which technically, believe it or not, was growth by about $89 million. Now, 89 million on 46 billion, that equates to a 0% growth rate. So is that good? Well, if you compare that to the previous year when they reported in 2025, they were down by $5 billion in revenues. So you tell me, declining revenue, and then now this year flatline, well, that's something, that's progress. But underneath that flatline, there's actually a larger story going on. The US looks like the turnaround is working, while in China, they're continuing to decelerate. It looks like wholesale is improving, while at the same time, direct to consumer is continuing to struggle. And so there's all these stories, this hodgepodge mixed bag of results that tell us whether this turnaround is actually working or not. So that's what we're going to look at today, is Nike's turnaround actually working? And are they getting back to growth? When I look at these growth stories, typically I run through 5 categories, which is first, what's the context of where the business is? What's their strategy? And then second, we're going to look at some qualitative data or quantitative data. Specifically, we're going to be looking at their 10K and all of their financial statements. Then we're going to look at qualitative data, which is what are the things that are coming out in the news? What's their marketing look like? And we're going to look at all of that data to determine whether they're actually executing against their strategy or not. And then finally, in step 4, I'm going to run a diagnostic, basically determine what their actual constraints are, and then give some insight into what I think could help their business at this point. And then finally, in step 5, I like to put myself in the shoes of someone walking into the business. I like to put myself in the shoes of a competitor, and also as an investor. I'm someone who has owned Nike stock in the past, so this for me is a pretty intriguing moment. And so we're going to be answering the questions: if I were to step into the company, what would be the 90-day plan? If I were a competitor, how would I be attacking Nike at this point? And then if I were an investor, do I think it's worth the investment at this exact moment? Real quick, I just wanted to say this was a beast of a video to make. You're looking at probably 20 to 30 hours worth of research and analysis that went into this. And I tried to boil it all down, but it still ended up being a 2-hour video. So make sure you go down below and you check out the different chapters. I've chaptered it all out so that you can easily navigate to what parts of this video are going to be relevant to you. And if you appreciate all of this work, everything that I've put into it, please give this video a like and maybe even just say something in the comments. That just helps YouTube's algorithm to know that people are valuing this content, and it just helps me feel a little bit appreciated for all of the hard work that I've put into this to bring you all of this information. So thank you very much, and now please enjoy. Now, as you know, Nike is basically an athletic company. As you can see here, we serve athletes. If you have a body, you're an athlete. So that's a clever marketing way of saying that we serve everyone. And you kind of see that on this next page. When we look at their customers, basically their customers are men, women, kids, adults, and it's across all sports segments. It includes athletic wear or athletics and also lifestyle, retro. So really Nike has gotten to the point where really they are for everyone, is kind of how they define themselves. Now, to run through their business as a whole, you can find all this information in their 10K, but basically their brands are going to be Nike, Jordan, and Converse. And when they report Nike and Jordan together, and then they report Converse as a separate item so that you can see how it's performing. Then customers we just went over. As far as their business model goes, they claim to be asset light, and they are mostly. They don't own a lot of their supply chain and manufacturing. However, they do own a number of retail locations. So that, in that sense, they are somewhat asset heavy, but by and large, they define themselves as asset light. And then how they make money is transactional. So they have goods that they manufacture and then they sell them. So it's not like subscription-based revenue. As far as their geos go, some people ask the question, is Nike an American company? And the answer to that question really depends on how you define the company. So if you're talking about where it's headquartered, well, it's headquartered in Beaverton, Oregon. That's where they started as well. So they are an American company. All of their design and innovation is done here in the U.S. However, their manufacturing is mostly in Asia, in Vietnam, and then in other places throughout Asia too. And they have other suppliers throughout the world, but most of their manufacturing occurs in Asia. And then as far as where they sell, well, they sell globally. So they have 4 different regions that they report on, and you'll see that in the 10K. They have North America, which includes the US and Canada. Then they have EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Then they have Greater China, so they just have China as its own thing. And then the 4th section, or the 4th region, is Asia, Pacific, and Latin America. And those are all kind of put together into one category. So is Nike an American company? Depends on how you define it. They sell to everyone across the globe, but they're headquartered here and they manufacture in Asia. Now, as far as their channel mix, Nike has really 3 channels, but they only report on 2. One is going to be wholesale retailers. These are going to be big box chain like you would be familiar with. Basically anywhere that you can go and buy shoes, those are going to be the chains that they sell to. So that's wholesale retail. Then they also have direct to consumer, which is split out into 2 different categories. There's online sales, which includes their website and their app and whatnot. But then they also have their brand retail. So those are going to be the actual Nike retail locations that they have. So they have wholesale retail, they have direct to consumer, which has those 2 segments. And then they also have like institutions, like colleges and universities and whatnot. But for the most part, we're not going to look at any of those numbers. We're just going to look at those 2 consumer-based ones. Now, as far as their product mix goes, as you know, Nike is an athletic company, so they serve several different product categories, and that's going to include footwear is obviously their most dominant category, but then they also have apparel. So this shirt that I'm wearing right now, they do shirts, shorts, socks, all of that. And in a lot of ways, they have these different product categories by sport too. So they'll have a golf shirt and golf slacks, but then they might also have basketball shorts and a basketball tank top, So they have a variety of products across 3 different categories: footwear, apparel, and then sports equipment too. So those are going to be like baseball gloves, footballs, that kind of thing. Okay, and then as far as their competitors go, I think of their competitors as being really 3 different segments. They have product competitors. So for example, in running shoes, Nike started as a running shoe, but nowadays they have running shoe specific competitors like Hoka or On or Brooks. The runners I know, they don't even really consider Nike anymore. When they're thinking about running shoes, they want something like Hoka. So there's product specific kind of competitors, but then they also have category competitors. So that would be someone like Lululemon, who have a distinct brand. They're going after a distinct segment of the market, and they really compete on premium apparel. So Lululemon would be kind of a category competitor, and then there's business competitor, and that would be like Adidas, for example, or Under Armour, or maybe Reebok back in the 90s. Seems like they're kind of irrelevant these days. But there's more business competitors like Adidas, who are global juggernauts, who are also similarly have products, a range of products across a range of different verticals and a large channel mix and all of that same stuff. So that's kind of the rundown of the business as a whole. So now if we ask the question, well, what's going on with Nike right now? What's the context of what's going on with Nike? Well, if you look at their stock, you can see that Nike has been going down for the last 5 years. It's down 76% on the last 5 years. And so if you're asking, well, why is Nike stock down? Here's the context. back in 2020, there was a leadership change. They brought in a new CEO, and the guy's name was John Donahoe. Now, John Donahoe, for context, he was with Nike since 2014. He was on the board, was there for about 6 years, and then, like I said, was made the CEO. His work history, he was at Bain Capital first, and then he worked at eBay, and then at ServiceNow. So really his background is more in tech. He wasn't from the Nike world, so to speak. Now, his strategy when he became CEO was to focus on direct to consumer, so sort of reduce some of their wholesale partnerships, and then focus on direct to consumer because there's more profit to be made that way. He also wanted to digitize ops so that there could be a better way to analyze how they're performing as a team and then make optimizations that way. He also made a big push towards more retro and lifestyle rather than sport. So he wanted to emphasize that Nike could be for everyone, really. So that was John Donahoe's vision. And at first that worked really well. He came in 2020, which was COVID time. And of course, we all know during COVID, everyone was buying online because retail was largely shut down anyway. So of course, there was a huge surge in performance, and things looked great until they didn't. And after that, things were just going worse and worse. They were losing traction, losing revenue. And so finally in 2024, they made a change and brought on Elliott Hill. Now, Elliott Hill, by contrast, he had been with Nike since 1988. He started as a salesperson. He worked his way, he held 19 different positions, worked his way all the way up. And then the rumor mill has it that in 2020, John Donahoe was picked for CEO over Elliott Hill. So at that time, he retired. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's hearsay. But regardless, he retired in 2020. And then in 2024, they reached out to him and brought him back on. And so now he's the CEO. And when he came in, his strategy was called Win Now. This was the strategy that he wants to do to get Nike back to its full force. So to run through his strategy, really there's like 6 or 7 pillars, and we're going to run through each pillar really briefly. But to start, he wanted to return to sport. So where John Donahoe was moving things towards lifestyle and retro, he wanted to make sport performance the key emphasis of everything that Nike does and stands for, which is really a return to their original brand positioning. So that was pillar number 1, was returning to sports, and as it says here, making the athlete the center of everything that we do. Now, number 2 was unifying design and innovation. Essentially, there was different design and innovation teams across the various brands, Nike, Jordan, and Converse. And what he wanted to do was reduce the clutter there, bring them all into a singular team so that they can speed up their go-to-market for new products and innovation. So that was the second pillar there. Pillar number 3 was returning or restoring their wholesale retailer relationships. So where John Donahoe had cut some of those relationships, Elliott Hill wants to restore those relationships. And really the purpose of that is to allow consumers the option of purchasing Nike anywhere they want to purchase it. So it's really about accessibility and convenience rather than profit, so to speak. It's not about being more efficient, it's about being more accessible. And so specifically, he calls out here that he wanted to reinvest into their partnership with Foot Locker, Dick's Sporting Goods, online places like Amazon. So that was pillar number 3. Pillar number 4 was inventory cleanup. And essentially what that is they had a bunch of unhealthy inventory that wasn't moving. And so they have marked down a bunch of that footwear and a bunch of that inventory to get it out the door so that they can make way for new inventory that they can sell at full price. So this was a pricing power strategy overall, but the idea was also to flush out a bunch of inventory and get all that overstock out. Now, pillar number 5 was about operational streamlining. So they wanted to flatten the organization, is the way that they put it, which is a nice way of saying they wanted to fire a bunch of people and make the chain of command shorter so that they can get information quicker and make decisions faster. So that was part of their strategy. And then also he wanted regional general managers to report directly to Elliott Hill. So that means whoever is over China has direct access to Elliott Hill so that he can hear what's going on regionally quicker and then make decisions quicker with that information. Now, pillar 6 was about unifying operations, supply chain, and technology. This one I'm maybe the most fuzzy on. I found an article later. We're going to look at that, but this was all about cost savings and being more efficient with their supply chain and whatnot. Now, pillar 7 was about re-engaging sports marketing. Now, we're going to go through what that means exactly, but essentially sports marketing is endorsements. So being associated with all of the top performers, the winners across various sports, so that Nike is associated with those, with high performance, essentially. Okay, so that in a nutshell is the win now strategy. So return to performance, returning to wholesale, liquidating a lot of that like stagnant inventory, organizational streamlining so that they can make decisions quicker, unifying tech and ops so that they can be more cost efficient, and then re-engage sports marketing. So that's essentially the win now strategy. And here's one thought that I have on that. When I hear that strategy, I've seen this a number of times in various companies that I've worked with and worked for. There is a tendency when a business takes a new direction and it doesn't work initially to cut its losses and return to what used to work. And that to me is exactly what this strategy is. It's returning to sport as the primary focus of the brand. It's returning to wholesalers. It's returning to sports marketing and that endorsement era marketing. And while that may work and that may be the right decision, sometimes that happens at the cost of innovation. And so where I think John Donahoe's strategy was right is that the world is digitizing, it's continuing to digitize, and that's not going to go away. So if direct to consumer wasn't working and that's why they're returning, is it because the strategy was bad or is it because it was executed poorly? And so to me, there's a question here of whether this is the right call, returning to what used to work at the risk of maybe becoming obsolete because you're not willing to figure out where the world is going and how to adapt to where the world is going with digital. So that's a question that I have. That's something that I've been ruminating on, and could be a mistake or it could be exactly the right thing that they need to do, and time will tell with that. Okay, so that's it for context and strategy. Next, we're going to move on to their quantitative data, which is their financials. So we're going to start. I want to define a couple of things as far as our operations go. There's two line items that they report on, and they're demand expense creation and operating overhead expense. And I want to define those two real quick. So when you look at demand creation expense, really those are two separate things, but it's all kind of summed up into marketing. But demand creation expense is both what they call brand marketing and sports marketing. Now, brand marketing is, as it says here, production and media costs, digital marketing expense, brand events, and brand presentation costs. So those would be at retail locations. Now, sports marketing is endorsements and, as you can see here, endorsements, complementary products, and sports marketing events. So it's important to distinguish those two. They're all lumped together, but because they're lumped together, we're not going to be able to see them by sports marketing versus brand marketing. But it's also important to know that this is just their overall marketing spend, essentially. Now, next is operating overhead. This is basically everything else in SG&A minus marketing. So it's going to be wage and benefit related expenses, R&D, bad debt expense, depreciation, amortization, cost related to professional services, technological investments, meetings, and travel. Now, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that R&D is incorporated in there. There's a whole section that we're going to talk about called design and innovation. It's their global brand division. We'll talk about that, but it's important to know that R&D is actually, so when we're thinking about product innovation and what they're investing into, R&D is actually lumped into this operating overhead expense. Okay, so looking at Nike as a whole, this is including all of their different segments. As a whole, when you look at this, revenue changed by 0% this year. It was up by, as I said, like $89 million. And cost of sales was down slightly by like $30 million. And so the net change there in gross profit was 1%. So it was up 1% compared to previous year. And then looking at gross margin, it was up by 20 percentage points. They attributed this to some logistics and warehousing cost savings. Not a huge gain there, but a slight move. And then when you look at demand creation expense overall, it looks like they've invested a little bit more in marketing by 1%. And then operating overhead expense was down slightly, but no percentage change, but just it was down by about $30 million. And so if you look at the overall net income, it was down by 3%. Now, down 3% sounds not great, but when you compare this to the previous year, when they reported last year, they were down 44%. So this is where, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, they were in a huge deceleration phase. And then this year, it's clear that some of the efforts that they've been making have started to stabilize the business, and it's sort of flatlined. And so then the question is the trajectory from here going to be up? That's the question that I have. But if you look here, still net income overall, $3.1 billion. That's nothing to sneeze at, you know? So overall, you can see last year there was a ton of deceleration, and then this year kind of flatlined. Now looking at their balance sheet, overall, really pretty healthy, a lot of operational leverage and flexibility. One of the things I like is their current assets is roughly $15 billion. Their current liabilities are about 12.5. So that leaves them about $2.5 billion worth of just money left over after they take care of all of their immediate liabilities. The other thing I like is that when you look at assets overall, assets grew by 5% year over year. And then compared to liabilities grew 0.8% year over year. So assets are outstripping their liabilities by quite a lot, which is good. I like to see that. Quick ratio is good, 1.2. Debt to equity was 1.58, but for a business like Nike, that's not crazy. So all in all, I think cash is good, debt management is good. They've got a lot of flexibility. The one thing that I found intriguing though in their balance sheet is if you look at accounts receivable. Accounts receivable in 2024 grew 6%, in 2025 grew 7%, and now in this most recent year it grew 25%. So that's a significant change. And so the question is why, and what are the knock-on effects of that? And I think I have an answer of why. I think it's pretty clear, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Now, looking at their cash flow statement, you can see again that their accounts receivable has gone up substantially. One of the things that I don't love to see is cash provided from operations has been declining year over year. So it was down 101% last time they reported. This most recent report down another 22%. So cash from operations is decreasing, and I don't love to see that. Free cash flow as a response to that is also decreasing year over year. In 2025, it was about 7%, and then free cash flow this year was 4.7%, which was a 33% decrease. So less free cash flow. Don't love to see that. Don't love to see the trend that they're going on, but still $2.1 billion is, again, nothing to sneeze at. So it is still generating cash, but the amount of cash that it's generating isn't growing, it's shrinking. And then cash conversion, this is another thing that the trend is the most concerning part of this, where they go from 130 to 115, and then most recently reported 92%. Now, 92%, is still pretty good. However, the trend is the concern that they're becoming less, the efficiency is diminishing. So that's a little bit concerning there. And then one other thing is I just noticed that their CapEx increased by 59% year over year. And it's not super clear to me where that investment has gone. So that's something that I'd be interested in a little more clarity on. Now, splitting this out by brand and also by product category, but this is again looking at mostly the whole business. So for Nike brand, which is going to include Nike and Jordan, you can see revenues were flat. Apparel was actually up by 4%, and then equipment was flat. Now, if you look at Converse, its total revenues were down 31%. We're going to dig into Converse all as a whole segment on its own, but for now, just know that that's kind of a trash pile. Then when you look at wholesale versus direct to consumer, you can see here wholesale increased by 6%, direct to consumer down 6%. So there was kind of a trade-off where, well, as you can see, wholesale went up, direct to consumer went down, but all in all, again, the net difference here is about 1% growth for Nike brands. And that's on the back of 2025's report where everything was down. So again, the context matters. Now looking at it regionally, this is where I think there's the most interesting information. North America actually grew by 5%. That's crazy. Now that doesn't get them back to where they were previously because they went down 9% the previous year. So, but still to have a 5% recovery is pretty good. That's like a V-shaped recovery almost. And then when you look at EMEA and Asia Pacific, kind of static results. And then China, you can see clearly, is down 11% year over year. So, and that's on the back of being down 13% the previous year. So while China continues to dip, the US has kind of had a down and then up moment. Now, looking at each of these segments one-on-one, I'm just going to run through these quickly. But North America, you can see they were up just about everywhere. All product categories, footwear, apparel, equipment were all up. Wholesale was up. Direct to consumer was the one area that was actually down. But wholesale was up 14%, which is a huge increase, where Nike Direct was down 6%. So don't love to see that, but maybe it's just a trade-off of now instead of forcing people to go to their locations to buy their stuff from their direct to consumer locations, now consumers have the option to just run to their local wherever, Big Five, and go purchase Nike shoes. Something else I loved here, gross profit was up 10%. Gross margin was up 210 basis points, which is great. So all in all, they had gone down 19%, and then, well, this is talking earnings before interest and taxes. They were down 19% this year, up 14%. So that's a pretty good recovery, I would say. In EMEA, it's kind of a mixed bag of results. Apparel was up, but the rest were kind of static. Wholesale was up, but direct to consumer was down. And so the rest were just kind of like decent results. One other note I wanted to make on North America was that you'll notice that their marketing expense was up. Demand creation expense was up 6%, and then everything else was up as well. And I'm noticing that as a trend. I'm not saying that there's a causality here, but demand creation expense was up, revenues were up. In this case, in EMEA, demand creation was up and everything was kind of flat. And then when you look at Greater China, everything is down. So footwear was down, apparel was down, equipment were down, wholesale channels were all down, direct to consumer was all down. Gross profit was down by 12%. Gross margin dropped by 30 basis points. And then you'll notice demand creation expense or marketing expense was also down 14%. So there is kind of a chicken and egg thing here to me, where is revenue down because marketing was cut, and so now they're not spending to drive demand, or was demand already diminished and so they're reducing marketing spend to staunch their overall losses? And that's a question that I would have for the leadership there at Nike, is whether this is a chicken or egg thing, because we're going to see it here again with Converse. So anyway, earnings before interest and taxes, they were negative 31% last year when they reported. This year they're negative 20%. So overall, China is going down. And then when you look at unit sales were down 14%, as well as a lower average sell price. So not only is volume down, but also they're having to discount, which is no good. Now, looking at Asia, Pacific, and Latin America, kind of a mixed bag. Some things were up, some things were down. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But I think the biggest important takeaway here is in their comments. They said Asia Pacific and Latin America revenues decreased by 1% on a currency neutral basis, primarily due to lower revenues in Southeast Asia and India, Japan, and Korea, partially offset by higher revenues in Central and South America and Pacific. So that's intriguing, and it makes me wonder if what they're experiencing is not just in China, but really it's all of Asia, and there's something more regional going on. Now, when I think about what's going on over there economically, Japan carry trade unwinding, Korea stock market tanking a couple weeks ago. China has been struggling economically for some time. So the combination of those three things makes me say, is there maybe something regional that's outside of Nike's control that is causing everything to tank? Or is it just that Nike isn't doing a good job in that region of engaging the Asian customer base? And that's something that I think requires a little more research. Okay, now I wanted to take a look at their inventory, because they said that they were trying to get rid of a bunch of inventory to make room for new inventory that they can run at full price. And so I was just looking at their inventory spread, and this is looking at revenue change versus inventory change. And if it's negative, that means that they are bringing on more inventory than they're bringing in revenue. And so you can see in 2025, all of the numbers were negative. So that means they were bringing in inventory faster than they were bringing in revenue. And now the opposite has started to occur in certain regions. So the US, it was 0%, which is fantastic. In China, it looks like they've probably just stopped purchasing inventory altogether. That would be my guess, because they were up 5% in spite of China being so negative. So if revenue isn't growing, then that means that they're just not growing their inventory at all, which means that they're probably discounting a bunch of stuff and trying to move all of their existing inventory. That would be my guess. But then they were still negative in EMEA and also APAC and whatnot. Now, one other thing to note, global brand division, like I mentioned before, it's their product creation and innovation. You can see that here in their notes. And so this is going to be essentially what they're investing into developing new cutting edge products. And so this is a critical part of their whole business. And there's not going to be much to report here because this is mostly going to be expense. But the only thing to note here is that actually operating overhead expense was down 5% in this division. And you can see that that led to an increase of 2% in their earnings before interest and taxes. Now, it was still $4.6 billion that they spent without kind of at a loss, so to speak. But I think it's important to note that the operating overhead expense was down because of their objectives about flattening the organization and unifying their design and innovation teams across the different brands. As I said, that was one of their strategic purposes. So we'll talk more about that here in a minute. Okay, and then finally we get to Converse, which is, for lack of a better way to describe it, kind of a dumpster fire. Footwear was down, apparel was down, equipment was down. They were down in wholesale, down in direct to consumer. And all of these are like double digit down. So down 30% footwear, 40% apparel, 34% equipment. Wholesale was down 31%, direct to consumer was down 31%. And this is on the back of a previous year. So this is like deceleration. Like they decelerated and now they're accelerating their deceleration, for a better way to put it. So they're really contracting. They had contracted negative 19% the previous year, and this year negative 31% in revenues. So that's significant. And not only are they contracting total volume or total revenue, but also their margins are being squeezed. So they were down 490 basis points in gross margin year over year. So that's pretty bad. That's not a good situation. And you can see here that it's not just it's unit sales decreased by 31% as well as lower average sell price. So long story short here, this is a major issue. And the thing that is most concerning when you look at earnings before interest and taxes, they were down negative 49% last time they reported. This most recent reporting, down 93%, to the point where they made $18 million. That's crazy. They generated $1 billion and they kept 18 million. That's insane. So clearly big problems going on with Converse. And I just happened to be perusing Nike's website trying to figure out what's going on with Converse, and I couldn't find much in their news articles, but I did happen to come across this picture, and I think this picture says everything that there is to say about how things are going at Nike or at Converse. Because if you look at this, it's basically a chuck, and it's got some kind of like bag going up, like it's connected to a baggy pant thing, but then it goes up to just below the knee, and then there's a drawstring there just below the knee. I don't know what that's supposed to be. It says here that it's two bold expressions of the Chuck Taylor. I don't know if this was something that was just for sale. I don't know if they were trying to sell this as a new product or if this was just some kind of like high fashion thing. But in either case, this is embarrassing. If this is the kind of product innovation that they have going on and the amount of creativity that they have going on at Converse, well, then no freaking wonder that their performance is terrible. So just thought I'd throw that in just for the kicks and giggles. Okay, so looking at their financials overall, as I look through all this information and try to compare it to what they're trying to accomplish with their Win Now strategy, as far as returning to sport and performance, I don't see a lot of data from the financials that indicate whether they are executing on that or not. So I need more information from their products, and I need more information from their R&D to know whether they're really investing into sport as they claim they are trying to. As far as wholesale and retail or wholesale and inventory goes, based on the accounts receivable that I saw, as well as the increases in wholesale in multiple regions, I'm going to say, yeah, they're executing that and that it's working. And that's what I was going to mention before with all of the increase in account receivables. That makes sense to me when I consider that they're trying to bring on wholesale partners, because wholesale partners are going to purchase through accounts receivable. And so if DTC is going down, then it makes sense that cash is going to go down. And if they're increasing their wholesale retailers, then accounts receivable goes up. That all makes sense to me. So when I saw that accounts receivable grew 25% last year, given their strategic priority to reestablish their wholesale relationships, then that kind of explains that, and it's not too concerning. So I would say, given their financials, I would say it's clear that they're executing there and it's working in certain regions. Now, as far as the inventory spread, that to me says that they are effectively moving inventory, and we see in multiple locations that they have been discounting. So I'm going to go ahead and check that and say, yeah, they're moving inventory, and it's clear that they're executing on that priority. Organizational streamlining, to me, it looks like the flattening is occurring, especially when I looked at that global brands division, where the operational overhead was decreased 5% year over year. That to me says that they're reducing staff and flattening their organization. Now, how effective that is, I don't know yet. Supposedly, we're not going to see some of that until 2026 and 2027, or 2027 is when we're going to start seeing the effects of that unified team. But we're going to have to wait until then to really know how effective that is. As far as unifying tech and ops, I didn't see a lot of information there. I did see, as I mentioned, those 20 basis points that were gained in the US from their logistics and warehousing. But other than that, I didn't see a lot of data that suggested that they are making moves there. So there's not enough data there yet. And then re-engaging sports marketing and the brand marketing versus the sport marketing, I don't think that their financials really said much about that. We did see an interesting correlation where they're spending money in the US and they're growing. They're spending money in Europe and growing slightly. And they are reducing their spend in China and revenue is going down. And they're reducing their spend in Converse and revenues are going down. Now, whether that's a chicken or egg thing, who knows? But right now, just speculating, there seems to be something going on there. And that's all I'll say. But I don't think the financials give enough data on that to really make any conclusions. So that's it for this financial section where we're looking at the qualitative or quantitative data. And now, next, we're going to jump into the qualitative data and look at what we can actually find that's been published by Nike. Okay, so now we've talked about all of the quantitative data, and now what we're going to look at is all of the qualitative data. So this is going to include looking at what they're saying in their news publications. We're going to be looking at what kind of products they have coming out. We're going to be looking at some of the changes that they've made on their team, as well as some of their marketing, because that, for me, marketing is my background, and so I'm really genuinely curious about how they're doing their marketing and what their strategy is, and if that strategy is consistent with their business strategy. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So to start, looking at their team, we just looked at the performance by region, and so it's important to know that in January 2026, Nike apparently didn't like what they were seeing by region either, and so there was a change to the general managers of EMEA as well as China. So in EMEA, they promoted a guy named Cesar Garcia, and now he's going to be over all of EMEA. And then in China, they took Kathy Sparks, who was over Asia Pacific and Latin America, and now they've made her over China. Now, this can be good. If things are going wrong in a certain region, it might be that the person leading the region is not prepared to do what needs to be done to make it work. Now, there's a risk in this though too, because when you bring in someone new, then they might have their own ideas and they might undo certain things that were working, and anyway, it just puts the whole strategy up at risk. And so there is some questionability when you think about switching leadership, but the thing that this does tell me is that they are prepared to pivot if things aren't working and if people aren't working in certain spots of the business. So that, I think, is a overall good thing. Now, I saw another announcement. This was in April 2026. They released this statement that was, I think this effectively details what they're trying to accomplish with unifying their supply chain, ops, and tech. And so some of these, as you can see, we're reshaping our technology team to sharpen alignment with the business, build leaner teams, and accelerate what matters most. This means consolidating our technological footprint, streamlining our structure to move at greater speeds and focus, doubling down on locations where we work, where our work gets done, with a focus on two strategically important hubs, the campus and the Nike India Technology Center. So to me, that's part of this air manufacturing modernization. So they're rebuilding some of their facilities or modernizing some of their facilities, which could have been part of their CapEx numbers that I was curious about. Nike ground game. So they're moving some Converse footwear manufacturing and engineering resources closer to the factory partners. So that's a good thing. And then materials, supply chain integration. We're positioning materials work closer to our footwear and apparel supply chain teams. So this, to me, is all about efficiency. These are the cost savings that they talked about. And so to me, I look at this and I say, okay, so this is their plan. This isn't totally reflected in their financials yet. However, this is their plan, and they're executing against that objective that they had. And overall, what this comes down to is reduction in approximately 1,400 roles. Now, again, going back to that, what I mentioned before about decreases in operational expense, well, this is partially why, is because they're letting people go. And so that's that. Now, looking at products, I wanted to compare some of this as we go through. I'm going to compare John Donahoe's strategy versus Elliott Hill's Win Now strategy. And I just want to draw the comparison so you can see the difference, or if there is a difference. So these are a handful of products that were created during John Donahoe's time. They've got the Nike Offline, there's the Nike Space Hippie, and then the ISPA. ISPA, it's an acronym, but it's basically a bunch of recycled stuff. So they're making shoes out of recycled garbage. Now, when you look at these, really the Space Hippie looks like the only shoe that could even relate to the sports category. The rest of these are, I don't know what you would call them, but they definitely fit more of the lifestyle vibe of shoe. Another thing I noticed from a lot of the products from John Donahoe's time is that they all touted the like recycling angle or the environmentally friendly angle. They didn't talk about sports performance really. So this is again a reflection of that time period, I would say. And given his strategy to move things more lifestyle, I think that makes sense. Now, here's just a handful of products that I've seen that they've been talking about just in the last 6 months. So we've got the Hybrid Fly, which is a marathon shoe, the Hyper Slide, which is a sort of recovery slide, supposedly. There's Studio Fleece, which an argument can be made that that would be lifestyle, but I think sweatsuit still kind of falls within the athletic category. There's this whole product line by, I forget her name, Keely Hodgkinson. And then the ACG, this is a hiking boot, which is cool. There's the Mind 002 technology, which is meant to be backed by neuroscience, and supposedly these 22 different points on your foot, if you have contact with them, they'll help you focus, and during recovery they've got these slides that can also help relax your mind and help with recovery. I don't know how true any of that is, but supposedly it's backed by neuroscience. They've got AeroFit, which is a new breathable sports athletic technology. They've also got ThermaFit, which is kind of the opposite. It's more of an insulation. And then they have things like Project Amplify, which, from what I understand, kind of looks like an e-bike, but for shoes. Or like those escalators that they have at the airport, the flat ones that you walk and you're just walking really fast. To me, that's kind of what this looks like. I didn't do enough research on it. But when I look through all of these products and I ask myself, do these products reflect that they're returning to sport performance? I would say yeah. I would say most certainly this to me reflects that they are returning to sport performance. Now thinking about, are they continuing sport endorsement? Because part of their strategy was that they were going to be investing into sport marketing. So I just picked up, these are just all from 2025, but they picked up a swimmer. They picked up this Ryan Williams, who's a football player. Faith Kipyegon, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she beat the world record. So as far as like being present at big time in sports, clearly they made an effort to put that whole thing together. And then there's a couple other people that they signed, Tara Davis Woodall and Hunter Woodall. And then there's a whole bunch of these name, image, likeness endorsement deals that they got signed, all of these high school students, all of these college students. So if I were to ask the question, are they continuing their sports marketing? I would say, yeah, certainly. It looks to me like they are executing against that strategy. They're continuing to bring on new upcoming talent, which is great. Now what I wanted to look at, I'm still thinking about this. Are they making sport the primary emphasis in the business? So what I did was I went and pulled up what Nike's website looked like in 2023 to compare how Nike's homepage then compares to Nike's homepage now to see if there's a difference. And when I looked at Nike's homepage from then, you can see the section by section here. The very top thing was a discount, probably for back to school. But then there was there's trending, then there's back to school, then there's like this lifestyle section. This lady here who's like wearing a workday outfit. Then there's retro, a bunch of like old school styles. Then there's again retro, and then a membership. So joining the membership. So to me, when I think about John Donahoe's strategy and if they were executing against it, they clearly were. Clearly, this is highly lifestyle, a lifestyle type of page. Now, when I look at the homepage as it is today, I'll be honest, I don't see as much sport performance as I would have expected. Um, Now, I do see that it's back to school, which makes sense because it's that same time of year. But when I look at this top section, this to me looks like kind of a lifestyle section. And then next, they have their new product. This is their new sweatsuit that I just mentioned. And it could be argued that that's sport, but again, I think of sweatsuits as actually being more like lifestyle. Um, and it's the middle of summer, so I don't know. Um, I'm gonna mark that as kind of questionable. And then finally, so in the one, two, three, fourth section, they get to Skims. Skims is athletic, um, and then next they're back to retro, and then after that, then we get into athletics. So then we're talking. They've got the NBA section, they've got the ACG section, then they have a back to school section, then a sports like cleats section. They have a runner section. They have the Aerofit section, and then finally at the very bottom of this one, trending. So where John Donahoe's strategy, they had trending at the top. In new Nike, they have trending at the bottom. So when I look at the homepage overall, I think they have done a better job of returning and making it look like it's all about sports. But to be honest, like the first couple of sections are not really about sports. It's more lifestyle. So I don't know how I would rate that execution, and whether it's aligned with what the strategy says or not. But it's definitely not a 10 for 10. Now, we talked about inventory and how they were marking it down and trying to move a bunch of inventory. Well, it just so happened that last weekend, my wife and I, we went to a local mall and we just were perusing. We ended up at a Lululemon briefly, which was weird because I've never been in a Lululemon. But then we were just wandering and we ended up in another sports store. And when we got there, we saw, I'm not kidding, 6 full, like probably 20-foot tables of Nike markdown stuff. And it wasn't all Nike, but it was a ton of Nike. Like I would say it's easily 70-30 split. 70% Nike, 30% anything else. Now, I wasn't sure if that was just that store specifically, or if this is part of their strategy that we were talking about them marking down a bunch of product to get it to move because it's kind of stale product, so that they can bring in the hotter product that can command full price. I don't know if it was part of that, but I could not believe how much Nike was sitting there on all of these tables and being marked down. It was quite shocking. And it wasn't just the shoes, it was men's and women's shoes, but then there was also a whole probably 60 feet worth of rack of apparel that was also marked down. Now, I wouldn't say the mix was like 70-30 of Nike, but it was still a pretty high percentage of Nike apparel that was all for sale, on clearance. So whether this is an intentional part of their strategy and this is them still trying to move inventory, if so, I would say that's a checkbox. I've now seen that and experienced that in real time. So I would say they're definitely executing there. But if it's not that, and these products just can't sell, then no wonder why everything is down, and revenues aren't really climbing all that fast. Okay, so tying this back to the overall strategy, after looking at all this qualitative data, when I ask myself about performance, does it look like Nike has returned to performance? I would say their website says, yeah, probably. Their product innovation certainly looks like it's all about sport. R&D, no way to know because it's hidden within those operational expense line items in the finances. So I don't know about R&D, but as far as product innovation goes, yeah, it looks like they've returned to sport there. Looking at unifying tech and ops, all of those layoffs to me indicate that yes, they are executing against that strategy, as well as that whole news thing from April 2026. I think that indicates pretty clearly that they're executing against trying to make supply chain and tech and their ops all more efficient by moving things closer together. And then finally, when it comes to sports marketing, are they doing sports marketing and executing there? Yeah, I would say so, given all the endorsements that they've made recently. and all the NIL deals that they've done, yeah, I would say that they are clearly executing there. But the thing that I question is it really effective? Are they actually getting a return on those investments, or is that just an old school way of doing marketing? And I think the jury is still out on that. But that's what I want to explore more is all of their marketing. How is their marketing actually functioning, and is it doing its job? And so to dig into that, that's what we're gonna dig into here briefly. So now we're looking at their marketing, and this is my background. This is what I love. I love marketing, and this is where I've helped businesses grow and become, 9-figure giants. I've helped with acquisitions and getting companies prepared to be sold, and so this is my bread and butter. I love marketing. So I just went through and I was just analyzing some of the qualitative data around their marketing because I'm never going to get my hands on their actual internal marketing data. So just from an outsider looking in, their organic search, 10 for 10. They show up in all the right places. They've got the map pack. They've got the product feed. They're the first result, obviously. All of their socials are there. So I would say for organic search and SEO, they're doing great. When I look at their organic social, it's kind of, to be honest, I'm a little bit shocked and surprised. I remember in the end of 2020, or the end of the 20 teens, like 2017, 18, 19, I remember that there was a strategy to try to split out Facebook pages by different categories. And it didn't seem like that was very effective at the time. I remember doing that myself with some companies I was working with. But it appears that that's what Nike did too. So you can see here, they have their main page, which is good, but there's a handful of these other Facebook pages. It appears that they split out by sport. So they had Nike football, Nike basketball, they had Nike sportswear. And you can see that all of these pages have been abandoned, like 2018 and 2020. They just haven't posted on those pages ever. So if they're not posting those pages, why do they even exist? They ought to just get rid of them so there's no confusion. But when I look at their main page, for some reason they have an international number there. I don't know why they would do that. That doesn't make any sense to me. So they have some international number there on the main page. And then also you can see that the last time they posted on the main Facebook page was 2025, September. So almost a year ago. That's crazy. I don't understand why that is the way that it is, but that's what I could see. And then oddly enough, in some of their other pages that they have, so like Nike Running Club, for example, has its own page, and that has a post as recently as, I think this was, July. And then Nike Canada also has a post as recently as in August. So, and that was another thing, is I saw that there were Nike pages split out by country. And so there's no clear rhyme or reason on who's maintaining these and how they're being maintained and the frequency at which they're being maintained. That's crazy to me. For a $1 billion company like Nike, that seems like should not be. Now, there is a case to be made that maybe Facebook is a little antiquated, so it's not worth maintaining at all. And if that's the case, then just get rid of all those other ones and just keep your main page. But anyway, very messy, really surprising. When I look at Instagram, it's a similar story. So they are posting more regularly. There's a post as recent as July 31st. We're now halfway. So, we're about halfway into August almost. So it's still inconsistent, I would say, what they're posting. And then when I looked at who had tagged them in their posts, it appears that they stopped letting people tag them, really, or stopped approving tags in like 2018. Now, why that is, I don't know. To me, it seems like you would want the community to be engaged and you would want them to be tagging you. But maybe they have a reason for it. I don't know, but I think that's kind of a mistake. And then when I look at their threads, it looks like their last post was in June 2026. So again, very irregular posting habits. I don't know if they have one person managing all of this, or if they have like individual people managing each channel, I have no clue. Now, again, talking about socials, I looked at their YouTube page, and they do have more recent posts. I think this one was as recent as like a week ago. But again, it's talking about that sweatsuit. And it appears to me that when I look at what they're posting on YouTube, it's all kind of secondary to their like traditional media. That's what it looks like. It looks like they've used their marketing budget to shoot this traditional media style content that goes on ads, like big traditional media ads. And then they post those as a secondary thought to somewhere like YouTube. So it's like they don't really have a content strategy. They just are supplementing their existing traditional media strategy. That's what it seems like. Now, when it comes to TikTok, that's probably their most active channel. It seems like they had posts as recently as like the day that I was looking at this. But when I was looking at like reposts and stuff, it seemed like they were really selective on who they were reposting, and it seemed like there was only a handful of them that were influencers. So again, when I'm thinking about how to engage a community and how to keep the younger generations interested in Nike as they get older, so that it's not just a Gen X and millennial thing, it seems like you'd want to be engaging the younger community, and it doesn't really seem like they're doing that through social media. So that's organic social. And so by and large, I just put it as like a 5 out of 10, because the fact is they're on all those channels and they are mostly posting, just not very consistently. So that's something. But there doesn't seem to be a clear strategy. There's certainly not a content strategy. And there's certainly not like a community engagement strategy there either. So I don't know, really it should maybe be like a 3 out of 10. It's like a participation award. Nike getting a participation award, how about that? So then looking at their influencers, this was something I was wondering when I was thinking about their endorsements, and so I just wanted to do a check. I went and looked up just a random endorsement for Nike, and it was a guy named Jamar Chase. I'm actually not even that into sports. I don't watch football, so I don't know anything about Jamar Chase. But when I looked him up, this was on TikTok. Not in any of his videos or photos that I see, including some of these sport ones, I don't see a Nike logo anywhere. Now, maybe this is just circumstantial and this just happens to be one person, so maybe this is not good data. But when I compare that to Faith Kipyegon, again, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 or 6 of these different videos where she's wearing Nike gear, and she wears it like a daily wear. Now, to me, that's good sports endorsement. If you can get someone who embodies, she's that world record breaker. So she already held the world record for the women's fastest mile, and then she broke her own record. And that's the kind of woman that you want sponsored by Nike. But even more than that, she clearly lives and breathes Nike. She wears Nike everywhere she goes. And that's the kind of person that you would want to endorse, I would think, is the kind of person who's going to live and breathe and embody what Nike stands for as a brand. And so I think they've done a good job with this Faith. But then when I look at this Jamar Chase, I don't know anything about him. But to me, he doesn't seem to even be representing the brand. It seems like a money grab. That's what I would say. So in that case, that's a poor investment in my mind. But then the other thing is I don't see any influencer marketing. I don't see them having an actual community of influencers who they go after and try to get them to wear Nike gear. So I think that's a clear miss. And I think it's a miss to not have their endorsements be influencers for them or ambassadors for their brand. So those are just thoughts. Now, when I was looking at their ads, the question that I kept coming back to is, what are they optimizing for? Are they trying to optimize for demand creation or demand capture? Demand creation expense is what the whole marketing category was called. And so I would think that they would be trying to spend their budget to generate demand. and then they could capture it through retail or through their local retail or through organic search and any of those other channels, because people know Nike. They don't necessarily have to run ads, like bottom funnel ads as most people would. And yet, when I look at Nike's ads, what I see is on Meta, for example, I mostly see bottom funnel ads. I see a lot of catalog ads for individual shoes. They're not even split out by category, which surprises me. You would think that if they were going to do that, they would at least split it out by sport, so that it was like all of your sports shoes, like soccer, for example. Maybe they have all soccer shoes, and maybe they have soccer shorts and soccer shirts, all as a singular collection. And then they do that through the feed, and they market that as a single ad, and then you can open it up and there's an instant experience with all those other products that are related to the sport. That would make sense to me. But what I see here is basically just basic product ads, and that seems crazy to me. Then when I look at the other thing that they have running, it's a lot of these little videos. Again, it looks like they've taken traditional media, sliced it up into smaller chunks, and then they package it into these ads. And then these ads run to collections on the website. Now, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with bottom funnel ads at all. I love it, in fact. But given Nike's strategy and their emphasis on brand, I don't think that this is hitting the mark, personally. To me, this is very bottom funnel heavy, and this is not investing into their brand. This is investing into direct response performance marketing. And that's okay if they want to do that, but they should indicate that that is part of their objective. That's one of their strategies, like for D2C, for example. So anyway, I don't think this is being executed very well, and I also don't think this is in line with their stated strategy. Okay, now moving on to Google. For some reason, they are very search heavy. They're always the top search ad, yet they're not the most dominant in the product feed, which is kind of confusing to me. So I did several screenshots, several tests here, but one, I just went and typed in just the brand term, Nike. And in the brand term, Nike, it was a 10 for 10. They were the first search result, but they were also all of the product results. And that's great, except for when you think about Nike, this arguably the strongest brand in all of sports, all of sporting. Do they really need brand search and brand product ads? I would say the product ads make sense. I don't know that they necessarily need the brand, because if people are going and searching for the brand, it's clear that they know what they want, you know? So that's one thought. I'm not saying that they don't need it, but it's something that I would question and I would want to see more data on. Now, when it comes to brand product keywords, so in this case, I did Nike Fly Zoom. And when I looked up a Nike, so it's brand product, they were in the first listing, which is good. And then there was a bunch of competitors or other like retail locations who were also advertising under that keyword. They were the first search term, or first search ad. So that's okay. And then the thing that I noticed here is that it's marked down. So that's the thing that I noticed through all of these products, is that all of Nike's products that are being run through their ads are all marked down. And I can't tell if that's a good part and an intentional part of their strategy, or if that's their desperation to get people to come and purchase, is that they have to mark down their stuff. And therefore they've created an audience that is looking for markdown. They've created an audience of markdown buyers and not an audience of brand enthusiasts. This reminds me of a problem I had with a business I worked with a couple of years ago. And this was always the struggle with them, was the agency that they worked with always wanted to run markdown, because with markdown, they would get a really high ROAS. And that's great. That looks good. Looks really efficient. But the problem was that they didn't want to, because of the brand itself, it was a luxury brand, and they didn't want to dilute their customer base to people who were just looking for markdown. They wanted premium customers who would buy full price. So there was always a balance of running markdown, but also not diluting the customer base with only markdown purchasers. Because if you do that, then you lose pricing power. And that's the thing that I question with Nike right now, is because I see all of these markdowns. I see it in real life. I see it in the financials. I see it when I'm out looking at ads. It's all markdown. And so I question what kind of people are coming in and purchasing, and I question the quality of their audience at this given moment. But regardless, I digress. So I also looked up some generic terms. I just looked up women's athletic clothing, and they were on there. Again, this is discounted, but they were at least showing up. There's a number of competitors that you can see there too, though, like Fabletics, for example. And then again, another generic term, men's basketball shoes, and they held a couple of places there, but again, both of their ads, they had the product marked down. So anyway, I find all of that a little bit concerning. And then as far as my anecdotal search for if they have DSP ads or display ads running, I couldn't find it on things that seemed like they would make sense. For example, I looked up best running, or what was it, best basketball shoe 2026. They didn't even show up in any of these product listings. So that's like, why not? They could easily do something like Stack Adapt and just have a simple retargeting ad running, so that if people are searching for something like this, then at least they can show up in the product feed and retarget to people who have purchased before or whatever. So that seems like a miss. And then when I'm looking, but I did happen to see, when I was looking at the Run Club in YouTube, I just went to YouTube and typed Nike Run Club. I did see that they did have a display ad. So clearly they're doing some amount of that. Maybe it's through a PMAX campaign. It's just speculation, but it appears that there's something to be desired there. Okay, so that's all acquisition. And now I wanted to touch quickly on their membership, because this is going to be the retention piece. And when I look at their membership, to be honest, it's not prioritized at all. So this is their desktop view of their website, and I just pulled the top and bottom sections because these are the only two places that you can even see to get into the area where you can go to sign up for this. But they have it at the very top that says join us or sign in, and then at the very bottom at the last section, trending, they have join us or sign in. So it's pretty easy to miss that. Now on mobile it looks a little bit better. On mobile they have this banner at the bottom that just says download the Nike app, and then you have to be a member to use the app, so that's something. Then they also have in the hamburger, when you open up the navigation, then there's this section that talks about sign up or join us. So that's a little better, but still kind of hard to get to the place where you can even start the membership. And then they also have it in the flow, and I made some comments here. I'm not even going to mention them now. But when you're in the checkout flow, there is an area right before, if you click go to checkout, then it pops up and there's this line above all the 3 checkout options where you can qualify for free shipping as a member, and then you can join us or sign in. Now, I think that's okay, but it's like you can't really, it's hard to get to the membership. And so I think that's weird. And then, like I said, I went and downloaded the app just to see what happens when you download the app. And this is the first thing I come to. So really, you have to be a member to even use the app, which is good to know. Now, the thing that I ask about the membership, and I forgot to mention this, but there are a couple of perks that you get when you're a member. So, for example, it says member experiences, receiptless returns, you get 60 days return policy, free shipping on over $50 spend. And then it allows you access to these various apps, the Nike's app, the Run Club, Training Club, sneakers, yada yada. Now, the thing that I question about this membership is it working? Is it actually driving retention, and is it driving lifetime value? We would need internal data to know any of that. If it is, then why are they not explicitly marketing the membership and making it easier to get to so that you can join? Like, I don't understand why they wouldn't have video ads on Meta stating all of the benefits, like a UGC style ad of someone stating all the benefits of having joined the Nike app. And then just running it as a lead gen campaign to get people into that way. So that then, rather than spending an arm and a leg to get someone to purchase through your bottom funnel ad through Meta, instead, you're spending a fraction of the cost to generate them as a lead into your membership, and then you market to them through the app or through their email or SMS or however you want to do it, and then market to them eternally that way. It would be infinitely cheaper per transaction, and then you have them for like life. So I don't know. I don't know if it's working. Why wouldn't they advertise the memberships explicitly? That's one question I have. And if it's not working, then why aren't they prioritizing fixing this? This should be something in their strategy that they should be working on. Because lifetime value obviously opens up a lot of doors. And loyalty programs and membership programs are supposed to drive lifetime value. So if it's not, then clearly this is something that needs a rework. And there are lots of other options. I've seen lots of loyalty programs. In fact, some of the competitors of theirs that I went and looked at had tiered programs that I like a lot better. If you spend so much, then you get access to a certain amount of benefits. And then if you spend this next tier level, you get these other additional benefits. And I think that's better than the way that this is, where it's free to join and you don't actually get anything of value from joining. So I don't know, incentivizing people to continue to purchase seems like a better way to have a membership and loyalty program. That's just a thought. Okay, so wow, I've been through so much. Now concluding all of this qualitative data, when I look at what they're doing in the quantitative and qualitative data and I compare it to what their stated strategy is with Win Now, and I ask, are they executing that strategy? I think the answer is clearly yes, they are. And I think the teams are very well aligned, to be honest. I'm actually kind of shocked at how well all of these teams are executing this specific strategy. So I think that's fantastic. I think they're doing a great job. I would say they definitely are reprioritizing sport. I would say they're definitely reprioritizing wholesale. We saw that with the financials. They're reprioritizing inventory and clearing out old inventory, whether on purpose or not, through markdown. Clearly, they've started organizational streamlining. They let go of a bunch of people. They've flattened their organization. They're clearly unifying supply chain by moving key supply chains closer to manufacturing and design teams. And then they've clearly started re-engaging sports marketing. They have all those new NIL deals. They have all those new endorsements. And for me, the whole question is, that's great. They're executing it and they're well aligned. So that's a huge thumbs up. But is it working? Is it actually effective? And when you look at it, are they growing? No. Are they moving in the right direction? I would say yeah, because before they were clearly decelerating. So now they've at least flatlined, and that's the right direction. But is everything going perfectly? Well, as we saw with markdowns, no. And as we saw with geographies, it's going great in the US, but it's going really poorly in China. As we saw with the brands, Converse is struggling while Nike is doing okay. As we saw with their channel mix, wholesale is doing a lot better while direct to consumer is still struggling. So is everything going perfectly? No. But are they willing to make pivots? Well, yeah. As we saw, they have brought in new general managers for EMEA, new general manager for China. They also recently brought in a new CFO. So, yes, they're most certainly taking steps and pivots to try to improve results because they're not moving as well as they would hope. And to me, that builds some confidence. So, that's everything that I have to share about their strategy. Are they executing the strategy? Yes. Is it effective? And is it working? Well, we may need to, that remains to be seen. Okay, so by now we've looked at a ton of data. We've looked at all of their financials. We've looked through all of the qualitative data that we can find. We've looked through all of their marketing to figure out what's what. And so now comes the time to diagnose where they are and what their constraints are. So to do this, as we do at agriculture, we always start with defining what phase of growth they're in so that we can understand what might be holding them back. So to start with Nike, really they're a phase 4 company, or what we would call a phase 4 company, which is enterprise level. And some of the characteristics that indicate that they're a phase 4 company are the fact that they're doing over $1 billion in revenue. They have 73,000 employees and they're publicly traded. So these are pretty common characteristics consistent with a brand that is an enterprise level brand and company. Now, at that level, typically the primary focus is going to be global market domination. So at that point, really, it's all about scale. You still need to be efficient, but really you're trying to grow. You're trying to grow and become the global dominant force. And so some of the key things that you'd be focusing on there is going to be your brand and making sure that your brand is sound. You have a distinct identity, a distinct positioning in the market. And then global expansion, which they've already done. They've already expanded globally, which is also another characteristic of the fact that they're enterprise level. They've already expanded globally, but it's also about making sure that each region is performing. And then market development, which ultimately is about making the entire segment grow as a whole. And so that's reinvesting, like Nike does, into these kind of events that draw in young kids and get them active in participating in sports so that sports and athletics as a whole continue to rise. And so really that's about increasing your total addressable market, really. Now, I like to look at performance from a profit equation standpoint. Now, if you've ever seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I like profit equations because if you define profit using the right KPIs, then that tells you very clearly what you need to be optimizing for. And so this is one that I like for a phase 5. It's not the only one. And really all of the other profit equations are still relevant for an enterprise level company. So really this is consolidating a lot of the other profit strategies or profit equations, I mean. But regardless, so this is the profit equation that I like. And really, you can sum this up to being revenue minus cost. That's all this is going to be, is profit is revenue minus cost. But the way that we're defining revenue in this case is going to be their total market share multiplied by their total addressable market. And then that's going to be minus their total new transactions plus their returning transactions. And ideally, their returning transactions will be higher if they're trying to be more efficient and improve their lifetime value, or new customer transactions will be higher if they're solely focused on acquisition. So acquisition and retention is essentially those two things that we're looking at. But new transactions, returning transactions, and then multiplied by the cost per transaction, which if you look at all of those, that cost is going to include the cost of goods sold. It's going to include returns and discounts. It's going to include marketing. And I would want to see all of those lined item out, to be honest. But really, if you focus on those 5 KPIs, then that tells you it gets you pointed directionally correctly. So you're looking at your acquisition, you're looking at your retention, you're looking at your costs associated with your transactions, and then you're also looking at, as a whole, across the globe, what percentage of the total addressable market are you actually capturing, which tells you how competitive you are in your global market domination strategy. Now, One of the things I wanted to look at specifically, I went and ran these numbers. One of the things that's interesting with Nike is that you can see, if you just look at their total addressable market, it's been increasing year over year for the last 6 years. And if you went back further, I'm sure it's been increasing since then too. But every year it's grown at least some percentage. Whereas if you look at Nike's revenue has been up and down. And so really their market share as a percentage of revenue, their revenue as a percentage of total addressable market has declined. So when you look at their peak, which would have been in 2023, 13.66% market share. If you look now in 2026, it's 11.05. So that's down almost 2.5 percentage points, which is crazy, especially given that the fact that that's only been 3 years worth of reporting. So definitely something to keep in mind. And if they're focusing on market share, then they would be seeing these numbers and be saying, okay, now let's look at market share and see why we're losing market share. Okay, so that's sort of the phase diagnostic to let me know where the business is at. And now, when I look at their constraint diagnosis, as far as like where things are going wrong, well, it's clear. We've seen it in the data. Basically, China and potentially Asia as a whole is a huge constraint. Converse, the entire brand, is a dumpster fire, which is a huge constraint. Direct to consumer is a huge constraint. And then their free cash flow trajectory is also a constraint, concerning. So this is what I can find with public data or publicly available information. But if I wanted to know why each of these are struggling, well, then I would need to get inside and see some internal data. And so, for example, in China, I'd be needing to look at their market share in China. I'd be wanting to see their brand search in China. I'd want to be seeing their product level sell-through, and I'd want to be seeing their new versus returning customer metrics. I'd also be wanting to see their marketing budget allocation to see where they're actually investing in their growth. Now, with Converse, some of the things that I would want to see internally is I'd be wanting, again, to be looking at brand search. I'd want to be looking at their retail partner sell-through. I'd want to be seeing their product roadmap because, to be frank, I can't think of the last innovation that Converse had as far as like product innovation. It seemed like Chucks are basically synonymous with Converse. So I can't really think of anything else that Converse has to offer other than Chucks. And that's concerning. And then I'd also want to be seeing their customer cohorts and seeing like what different segments could be determined from that. Now, as far as direct to consumer goes, what I'd want to see, what internal data I'd want to be seeing is marketing allocation by brand versus sport. I'd be wanting to see marketing allocation by brand versus performance. So brand versus sport, that's their language, but brand encompasses all that other stuff. So now when I say brand versus performance, what I'm saying is I want to see what they're actually spending on branding versus performance, their bottom funnel stuff. And then I also want to see acquisition versus retention and how their marketing budget is allocated between those two objectives. I'd also want to be seeing all of the regular marketing metrics. So all of those same things by brand and sports, by brand and performance, by acquisition and retention. And also I'd want to see that by channel. So for Google and Meta and wherever else they're advertising. And then finally, I'd also want to see their customer journey map, and or in other words, their funnel. And I want to see like how are they actually intentionally driving customers through that funnel. So that's the internal data that I'd want to see for that. And then as far as free cash flow goes, the internal data I'd want to see is what their accounts receivable and wholesale cash conversion. I'd want to see what that looks like. I'd want to see line by line what their working capital and cash pay bridge is. I'd be wanting to see project level CapEx return. So for each of these things that they're spending their money on, what's the return on those? And then I'd also want to be seeing cash contribution, or in other words, profit, by region, by brand, by channel, to get a better idea of how performance is actually happening, or how they're actually performing. So that's basically the constraint diagnosis, and those are all the internal things that I would want to be seeing from the business if I were to go in and actually diagnose what's going on. So that's it. That's the diagnosis. And now next, and finally, we're going to jump into those three categories of if I were to jump in as a leader or a competitor or as an investor, what I would do with all of this information that I've presented today. Okay, so first, if I were on their team, there are really three things that I would want to be seeing. One, I would want a segmented dashboard. I would want 2 focused sprints, focused specifically on China and Converse. These would be 90-day sprints. And then lastly, I would want omni-channel KPIs. So to look at these each one by one, when I say segmented dashboard, I want good data, which includes basically like new versus returning data. I'd want units sold, average sell price. I'd want contribution margin. I'd want spend. I'd want full price sell-through. And I'd want inventory age. And I would want all of that data by brand, by geography, by product, and by channel. And by getting all of that data, I'll be able to see everything that's going on within the business across every important piece of the business. So that would be the first thing, is getting the correct data and then the right dashboard in place. Now, second, 2 focus sprints. So for China, this would be a 90-day sprint, and I'd want to be testing to see what the brand strength is in China. I'd want to be seeing whether there's a problem with the regional economy of all of Asia. And then I'd want to be seeing pricing, because if they can't price competitively, then that's obviously problematic. And then I'd want to be seeing their athlete and content strategy. And really what I suspect is going on with China is that my guess is that Nike doesn't have the same sort of pull there or the same sort of brand identity there as they have elsewhere. And so, is it just a matter of using Chinese athletes in an ad that embody the same identity that Nike offers of this top performance? I'm the best. I'm going to win at all costs. I'm going to just do it. Is it just as simple as getting people to believe that by wearing Nike in China and being a part of those kind of stories with top athletes in China, that's what will bring people over? Maybe. Or is it just there's literally nothing they can do because it's a larger regional problem, and it's beyond Nike's ability to fix? These are the kind of questions I'd be wanting to figure out in 90 days. For Converse, I'd also be wanting to do a 90-day sprint. And really what I'd be looking at is relevance by product. So again, Chucks are like the only product that I even know that comes from Converse. So I'd be wanting to figure out like what are the relevance of any other products that they offer. I'd want to be knowing like what their customer, who are their customers? What is their customer base? And then I'd also be wanting to look at their discounting. Like, is there a lot of discounting that they're doing that doesn't allow them to be profitable? So these are some of the tests that I'd be wanting to look at. And then finally, for omni-channel, really, I would want to move away from looking at wholesale versus direct to consumer. I think it's really helpful for conversations like this because they've explicitly stated that wholesale is something that they're focusing on. So I appreciate that they've reported those numbers, but I wouldn't want to be looking at the business by wholesale and direct to consumer. I'd really want to be looking at the omni-channel KPIs, because that's what they're really trying to do, is make themselves more available. They're trying to make their products more accessible. And so if that's the goal, then really it's not about this or that. It's about how do they combine together to grow the business as a whole. So what I'd be wanting to see is profit across the entire marketplace. So I'd be wanting to see, where does the first purchase occur? Where are repurchases occurring? And I'd want to be seeing, does direct-to-consumer actually help lifetime value? Because if not, then it's probably not doing its job. I'd want to be seeing if brand spend is effective. So are they lowering cost or customer acquisition cost or cost per purchase? Are they reinforcing the brand's identity? Are they increasing brand search? These are all questions that I would want to see across the entire company, and I'd want to see how these individual pieces are contributing to the whole. So, the other thing I'll just mention here is I have a whole bunch of thoughts from all of the qualitative data and marketing research that I did, and really one of the things that I think Nike is missing that's kind of an easy opportunity for them is to have like a sport podcast, and it wouldn't have anything to do with Nike as a brand. Of course, they could plug their products if they wanted to, but really it's a way of tying Nike with sports permanently and building a whole new audience of people and staying relevant. And so this is more of a content strategy. It doesn't appear that they really have much of a content strategy, but if they were to start, say, like a sports talk show on YouTube, and they bring in one top athlete who everyone is going to know to be one of the commentators, and then they bring on someone else who's really a YouTube person who knows how to produce YouTube content, but who's also involved with Nike and knows athletics and all of that. If you can merge those two into a single show, then you can be a part of something bigger, and you can stay relevant with sports. You can do all of your branding. You can report on top performance and all of that. And then you also have a place to plug your new products and how your new products are performing and tie them to your existing endorsements and all of that. And so to me, it helps them stay as an authority in the space, and it also helps them be relevant to the rising generation who are more and more being absorbing podcasts and that kind of information. And it's an alternative to something like SportsCenter. And it doesn't have to be anything about Nike. It can just be Nike's and then XYZ, and just have it all about sports and basically like sports news. So that's just the thought. I think that would be something that Nike has enough money floating around that they could invest in, and I think would be a significant return or be a significant benefit to them. And I'll just say this. Part of why I say that is because for me, Shoe Dog, that book, Phil Knight's book, nothing built my brand loyalty to Nike like that book. I read that book and it gave me a different appreciation for Nike as a whole, and the level of hardships that they went through and the just do itness that they embodied as they built the company from the beginning to where it is now, or where it was in 2017 anyway. It's inspiring, and it's an identity that I want to step into. This identity of being able to overcome hard things and do whatever I set my mind to. And so I wear Nike because I want to embody that spirit. It's part of my identity that I want to embody. And so when I wear Nike, that's what it feels like I'm doing, is stepping into that identity. And if they have that sports talk show, I think it could do something similar, where again, it could embody that spirit of overcoming and that spirit of top performance, and inspire other people to reach for that. And that just perpetuates their brand identity. So anyway, that was just a thought. Additionally, they're not doing almost anything with influencers, so obviously I think they should be working on that, and rather than just doing endorsements, get some like actual athletic influencers involved. They should do a lot more UGC. I don't know why they don't focus on UGC at all, but that seems like an easy win. And then their membership. I don't know what they're doing with their membership. I don't know why they don't have it tiered out. But I have a lot of questions on whether it's actually improving lifetime value or not. And so if it were me, I would probably revisit their membership and go look at some of their competitors and see what they're doing to see if maybe there's something better that they can be doing. So that's all of my insight for if I were to join their team. First 90 days, those are the things I would be working on. Now, speaking of competitors, these are the same ones that I referenced earlier. And again, just to keep it like product level, category level, and business level competitors. And so first, to just look at Lululemon, if I were a competitor looking at Nike and where they're situated, I would continue to attack women's athletic identity. I think Nike has done an okay job of partnering with Skims to sort of capture this part of the market and to stay relevant and compete with Lululemon. But I think they're ahead of the game on that. I think for women who want something that is premium and that looks bougie while they are doing their Pilates or whatever they're doing, I think Lululemon is kind of the name of the game. So from a branding perspective, I think they've done a great job, and I think they need to continue that, because if they don't, then Skims is coming after them. I also think that they have a really good retail experience, better than any Nike store I've ever been into. When we were at the mall the other day and we went through that sports store, we also popped into a Lululemon just on a whim, and I was actually really impressed by how the customer experience felt when I was in that store. And so as far as experiential retail goes, I think they're doing a fantastic job, and I think that's what helps them capture the premium pricing that they have for their products. And then again, as far as brand identity goes, I think they need to continue to push that brand identity of like looking good while you exercise. So anyway, that's just a thought about Lululemon. As far as Hoka goes, I think Hoka and On, they should continue building their specialist credibility. Where Nike has come from, or where Nike has gotten to, is at this point they're basically saying they are for everyone. And that's an advantage in an economy of scale, but it's a disadvantage in the niche realm. Because now Hoka can say Nike's for everyone, and they can reinforce that idea that Nike is just for everyone. Whereas Hoka is actually for runners. And my wife, she runs, and like I've mentioned, she doesn't wear any of Nike's stuff. She thinks of Nike as being just like a in-name only kind of thing. Whereas Hoka and On, they actually have performance gear that helps and improves running. So Hoka should be leaning into that and reinforce the idea that Nike is for everyone, but Hoka is for runners. Now, the other thing I think they should continue doing is continue investing in their wholesale retail development. And the reason why I say that is Nike made a huge misstep when they pulled out of a lot of those relationships, and they opened a door for new brands like Hoka to come in and fill that gap. And it's clear that Nike has regretted that, but it's important for Hoka to not lose ground to Nike as they come back and try to get back into those relationships. So Nike or Hoka should continue to develop those wholesale relationships to keep their foot in that door, and if possible, expand it so that it makes it harder for Nike to get back in. And then I also think that Hoka could benefit from developing their affiliate program. And when I say affiliate program, mostly I mean partnering with different sports content creators and like go hand select affiliates, not just having their general affiliate program through Rakuten. And I think why that would be beneficial is because then other people are marketing for them, and it continues to get their wedge into the running community. So if they go after running specific content creators, then it helps them to wedge into that niche even further, and continues to help emphasize that point that runners, they use Hoka. So that's what I would be doing with this information if I were them. Now Adidas, I pulled a bunch of their reports too so that I could actually compare how they're performing compared to Nike in China. And this is probably the most interesting part of this whole video to me. When you look at Adidas and how they've performed in China, they're seeing growth. They're not experiencing the same reality that Nike is experiencing in China. Now, granted, Adidas globally, they're they're not doing as much volume as Nike is doing. So they're a little bit smaller. But regardless, when you do cost adjustments, or not cost adjustments, currency adjustments, they did $2.4 billion in China just from January 1st to now. And that's a 14% increase over last year's numbers between January to now. And so they're in China and they're growing. And not just China, but they're growing in China and they're growing in APAC and North America and Europe. They're growing everywhere. And so part of me wonders, is it that Nike is really just losing its ground, losing its footing, and people prefer a brand like Adidas? I don't know. I really don't know. But when I look at these numbers, they're not seeing the same experience that Nike is seeing across the globe. And even right now, this past 6 months, they're seeing improvements across the board. You can even see not only are they growing volume, but they're also growing their margin. So they're generating more revenue and they're doing it with better margins. And their margins are considerably higher than what Nike's are right now. So if I were Adidas, I'd just be keeping the faith. I mean, I'd continue to reinvest into these different regions where Nike is struggling, and I'd continue to do whatever they're doing right now in China specifically, but really across the globe, because they're seeing growth across every region, every product category, and both across direct to consumer and wholesale. So whatever they're doing, it's working. And so I think what I'm going to do, just as a side note, is I'm going to go dig into Adidas next, and then I'm going to post a video about them and compare them to what Nike is doing. But that's maybe a video for another day. Now, as an investor, people might be questioning, is Nike a good stock to buy? And here's what I think. When I'm looking at Nike as a buying opportunity, number one, I'm asking, are they growing? They claim to be a growth company, but are they growing? No, they're not growing. But is the turnaround working? Well, maybe. And your confidence in that maybe is sort of dependent on the executive team and the strategy that they're executing. And I think there's some evidence that maybe it's working because of the the flattening of revenue. So maybe they've stopped the bleeding. So there's a question of maybe it's working and maybe not. But really, if you feel confident in the team, then maybe that feels a little more convincing that the turnaround is working. Now, are shares being diluted? Well, no. They've done some stock buybacks, about 100 and something million in the last year. But they also did like 790 million in stock-based compensation. But really their dilution was kind of throttled. So when you look at just the numbers, it was actually down by like 3%, the diluted overall shares outstanding. So that's good. Now, when you look at Nike's return over the last 4 years, as I said in the beginning of the video, it's down 76%. So that's both maybe a time to buy because now it's super cheap compared to its historical values. But smart people always say, don't just buy something because it's cheap. And I agree with them there. Then when you look at valuation, so it is trading cheaper compared to its previous years. But when you look at the trailing price to earnings ratio, the current price to earnings ratio, and then the forward price to earnings ratio, you see that it was 11 in the past, and now it's 19.5, and it's projected to be up to 24, and that's the forward PE, and that's the wrong direction. When you look into the forward, you want to see that number lower than it is today. So I don't know, from a valuation perspective, to me, it seems like it's still overpriced and maybe a little bit expensive. Now, as far as their dividend goes, they actually do have a great dividend. So if you wanted to just put your money in there, park it, and then hope that the turnaround works, then you have all the growth upside potential, but then you're also earning dividends the whole time. Well, that's cool. Their dividend is 3.93%, which is great. But then I also question, is it sustainable? Because of everything that's going on with their free cash flow, are they going to have money to keep paying these dividends if revenues continue to shrink? And I don't know. So that's something that's questionable. And then their moat, they do have a wide moat because of their brand identity. No other sport brand has the same kind of brand identity as Nike. So they do have a pretty wide moat, but it's primarily brand driven. And if they are losing ground in places like China, then it's being challenged. And according to the numbers, it seems like they're not really making up that ground. So I would question it. They have a strong moat, but I would question whether it's going to be strong forever. So by and large, where I fall on this as an investor, I'm not buying it. Not yet. It's definitely something to put on the watch list though, because of, like I said, the upside potential as well as the dividend. So what I like about it is that even if, in spite of everything that we've talked about, they're still profitable. They still generated $3 billion in profit. They're still cash generative. They did like 2 point something billion in cash. They're flexible, operationally flexible. Their balance sheet is still strong. They still have the global market, so they've still got all the scale and opportunity to grow at this point because things have been going wrong for the last couple of years. So they have opportunity to rebuild the momentum in all those areas. And then, of course, their brand is strong. It might be weakening, but regardless, there is no other brand in sports like Nike. So those are the things that I still like about Nike. But what I would want to see before I purchase, probably one, I'd want to know that the turnaround is complete. I'd want to see all of their different regions returning to growth, or at least the company as a whole returning to growth. I'd want to be seeing resolution with Converse. I don't know what is going on there, but if they were to sell Converse, I would be happy with that because it doesn't seem like there's much of a plan. But either Converse needs to be let go or turned around, and I want to see some resolution with whatever they're going to do there. I'd want to see a clear bottom in the stock price. So I wouldn't want to be buying right now as I'm continuing to see the trend go down. I'd want to be seeing some sort of flat line and then see it starting to come back up. So higher highs or higher lows, essentially. And then also I'd want to be looking for volume and momentum moving into Nike so that I know that there's big money on the sideline that's moving into it that is also going to carry the price higher and drive that stock price growth. So that's it. That's the very end of all of those things. And then just as a bonus, here are the 3 lessons that I get from this whole exercise. Number 1, flat revenue can be progress. Because when you've got a year where you've decelerated so hard, flat is actually a step in the right direction. It at least shows the step in the right direction. So that's good. Additionally, consolidation hides real problems. If you were to just look at that surface level number and just say, well, revenue was flat, so they've flatlined, well, that doesn't tell you the whole story. That doesn't tell you that actually the US market is doing really well compared to a place like China, where it seems like there are continued issues. So consolidation hides where the problem actually lives. And then lastly, the 3rd lesson I would say is data. Quantitative data, qualitative data, it's all useful for getting a whole picture view of how a company is performing. And so it's not enough to just say the numbers look this way and so therefore XYZ. You also need to get the context and have an understanding from a qualitative standpoint how things are performing. So those are the 3 lessons. Flat can be progress, consolidation hides problems, and you need data to make good decisions and to really understand how things are performing. So that's it. Thank you very much for joining me on this wild and very long journey. If you enjoyed this, please stick around, subscribe to the channel, like the video. That helps it get around to other people. If you would like me to do this kind of diagnostic work on your own business, let me know. There's links in the description below. You can go apply to work with us. We can't work with everyone because there's only one of me. We take it as an application process, but if you'd like to apply, that's totally free. And alternatively, if you don't want the full diagnostic, but you just kind of want a slight rundown, of your phase and all of that. There's a free quiz that you can do. It uses your own data. You just answer, I think it's 10 questions or less, and then it will spit you out roughly what we would guess your phase is, what your focus needs to be, what your profit equation could be, and then what the KPIs you could be focusing on for your business are. So that's just a free tool. Feel free to go ahead and use that. And then finally, if there's a video or if there's another business that you would be interested in seeing this kind of deep analysis on, go ahead and throw it in the comments. Let me know who you would like me to do next. I've got a list of brands that I'm going to do anyway, but if you have a specific company you want to know more about, tell me what it is and I'll jump into it. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you have a great day until I see you next time.